All right, we want to continue talking about how to use Pythagorean's theorem. We're going to concentrate this video mainly on Pythagorean theorem word problems, but I do want to point out something I didn't tell you last time, and that is sometimes when you're trying to find the missing side, it doesn't have to be a perfect square. The ones I gave you as examples in the last video were always perfect squares. But if I had something like this, a right triangle, and I said this was 7 centimeters and this was 5 centimeters, and I wanted to find the hypotenuse, again, I could use the formula h is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. And again, whichever one you call a or b here is up to you because it doesn't matter. All right, so this would be 7 squared plus 5 squared. By the way, 7 squared is 49, 5 squared is 25, and when I add 49 and 25, I get an answer of 74. Now, you should know by now that there is no square root of 74, that it's an irrational number. So you say, what do you do then? Well, what do we do with irrational numbers when we're finding the square root? We either round or we write in the simplest radical form. And you say, well, which one? And I say, well, that depends on the problem. Okay, if the problem wants you to give to the nearest tenth, then it wants you to round. If the problem says write in the simplest radical form, then it wants you to write in the simplest radical form. So again, different problems ask you for different things, and you just have to do what that problem asks you for, okay? Now again, I hope you remember how to round the irrational numbers by using the algorithm, and I hope you remember how to write an irrational number in simplest radical form. Now you might ask me, well, what if they don't ask me one way or the other? What should I do? And I say, well, then that's up to you. You got the power. You got the power. Okay, you can do it the way that you prefer. Some people like to use the algorithm and round to the 10th. Some people would prefer to write it in simplest radical form. And again, if I don't state one way or the other, then you choose the one that you'd prefer. By the way, I would tell you this. As far as for everyday real life, I think you would rather round to the 10th than write in simplest radical form. Because I don't think you could go to a hardware store and say I need 5 square root of 3 feet of lumber. They would have no idea what that is. However, if you would round it, they would know how to give you the amount of lumber that you needed. Anyway, now let's go ahead and look at a word problem that uses this. Okay? Let's say we said that there's a 12-foot ladder, all right, that is leaning against a building to a window that is 10 feet from the ground. How far is the base of the ladder from the building? Now again, if you read this, you must probably say to yourself, what on earth does this have to do with Pythagorean's theorem? All right, and the answer is you have to draw a picture. Remember in the very beginning when we first started word problems, I gave you lists of all kind of different type of word problems you need to find. One of those type of word problems that you needed to find, okay, or one of the type of methods you used to find it was draw a picture. Now, I've never really given you many examples of where that would be helpful, but in Pythagorean's theorem, it's very helpful because it's very hard to use Pythagorean's theorem unless you can see a right triangle. So drawing a picture will give you the right triangle. So what picture am I going to draw? Well, you know how great an artist I am, but we're going to draw a building. I think I can handle that, at least somewhat. Okay, and the building is going to have a ladder leaning against it and a window up here. Okay, and it wants you to find out how much distance is there. So that's what I'm looking for. I know this distance, that's the ladder. So what's the distance of the ladder? The distance is 12 feet. And I know this distance too. That's the distance from the ground up to the window. So what's the distance from the ground to the window? It says the window is 10 feet high. So again, the first thing you have to do is find the right triangle, and I hope you see that. The next thing you have to do is determine, are you looking for a leg or are you looking for a hypotenuse? And in this case, I'm looking for a leg because the hypotenuse is here and I already know it. So A is equal to the square root of h squared minus b squared. And you say to me, how do you know that that's A? It doesn't matter. If you want to make it B, B will equal the square root of h squared minus a squared. It's just going to be the hypotenuse squared minus the leg you know squared. Anyway, replace h with 12 and square it. Replace b with 10 and square it. And then you get a is equal to the square root of 144 minus 100. A equals the square root of 44. Now again, the problem doesn't state whether it wants it in simple triangle form or it wants you to round. So you have to make the decision which one you want to do. Personally, in this one right here, I think I'd rather write it in simple triangle form because I can see how easy that would be if I break this down into 4 times 11 and 4 into 2 times 2 times 11. I got a pair of 2s, so I can take a 2 out, and I have an 11 that's not in pairs, stays under, and my answer would be 2 square root 11 feet. Now, that's a very accurate, that's the exact distance, but that doesn't help you if you really want to know how far to put the ladder away, because nobody knows exactly how much 2 square root of 11 is. Now, if I want it, I could choose to round it to the nearest tenth, which means add a decimal, 2 zeros for the tenths place, 2 more zeros for the hundredths place. Now let's do this where we can see it. All right, 2 for the tenths place, 2 for the hundredths place, and again, why 2 places for each? Because the algorithm says mark off every 2 places. What number squared is closest to 44 without going over? And that would be 6. Square 6, 6 squared is 36. Subtract and get 8. And here's the algorithm process again. Drop the next mark off, double the 6 and get 12 and put a blank behind it. Now you can divide 1 into 8 goes exactly 8 times. And with the carryover, that's going to be way too big. It might be smarter to divide 12 into 80 goes 6 times, if you know your 12 times table. Whatever you put up there, you put here. 6 times 6 is 36, carry your 3. 6 times 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15, carry your 1. 6 times 1 is 6, and 1 is 7. I didn't guess too big. I can subtract, and I get a remainder of 44 again. By the way, you might say, well, that means this repeats, but not really, okay, because, excuse me, it won't be the same divisor, so it won't be the exact same answer. Anyway, I repeat the exact same process. I drop the next mark off, I double 66, which is 136, or else I could just add 6, I'm sorry, it's 132. I can just add 6 to 126 is 132. Then I could divide 1 into 4, goes 4 times, okay? But again, excuse me, well, I could even try 4. And again, you say, but Mr. Do, you know 4 is going to be too big. Well, the reason I'm trying 4 is because it really doesn't matter if 4 is too big, which it is. I already know what I'm going to do when I ram. Since 4 is too big, I know that the 6 is going to stay the same because this is going to be less than 5, so this stays the same. This is 6 6/10 feet. And again, that's an answer that you could actually deal with. You could tell the firemen, lean it 6 6/10 feet away from the building, and they would basically know what that is. You tell the firemen, lean it 2 square root 11 feet away, and I doubt seriously they'd know what that is. All right, so that's one word problem using Pythagorean theorem. And again, the picture shows you the right triangle, and the right triangle, okay, tells you whether you're looking for hypotenuse or leg. And then you can use Pythagorean theorem to solve it. Let's look at one more example. Let's say a man walks 5 miles due south, then 3 miles due east. How far is he from where he began? Now again, when people see this problem, they go, Mr. Dude, this is so simple. This is like a second grade problem. He's 8 miles away from where he began. No. You go, Mr. Dude, 5 miles and 3 miles is 8 miles. He walked 8 miles, but that doesn't mean he's 8 miles away from where he began. And you say, well, I don't get it. Why wouldn't he be 8 miles away from where he began? And I say, draw a picture. One picture is worth 1,000 words. So we'll start with the man. And let's give him muscles so he's a manly man. All right? And again, he walks 5 miles due south. On a compass, south is down, so we're going to go 5 miles due south. And then he turns and goes 3 miles due east. By the way, due south, due east means exactly south, exactly east. And that's kind of important for this problem, because by going due east 3 miles, okay, that makes this a 90-degree angle. From due south to due east gives you that 90-degree angle. So now I want to know how far it is from where I started to where I ended. And you go, well, Mr. Due, 5 and 3 is 8. I didn't say how far did he walk. I want to know the distance from here to there. And now, can you see your right triangle? Yes. And now the question is, are you looking for hypotenuse or are you looking for the leg? And the answer is, you're looking for the hypotenuse this time because you're looking for the long side. So you use the formula. H is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. By the way, I hope you copied those formulas from the last video, and again, it would be very smart to use them, to learn them and to use them. Anyway, to find h, I replace a with 5 and square it. I replace b with 3 and square it. And again, it doesn't matter which one you call a and b, it's still going to be the same thing. Excuse me. So, the square root of 5 squared is 25, plus 3 squared is 9. Your answer comes out to be h equals the square root of 34. Now again, that's your answer, and it's a non-perfect square. So now you have to make a decision. Do you want to round to the nearest tenth, or do you want to write in the simplest radical form? And again, in a way, you're asking which one do you think is easier? But in real life, you'd be asking which one is going to help you most, okay? Because the truth is, simplest radical form will give you the exact answer, but it's not very helpful. Okay, rounding takes a little longer and it's only approximate, but it's a lot more helpful. Anyway, if I did this in simplest radical form, I could break this down into 2 times 17, and that's it. They're both prime numbers. So guess what? In simplest radical form, my answer is the square root of 34. Now, if I wanted to do it rounded to the nearest tenth, again, I'd have to add a decimal, 2 zeros for the tenths place, 2 zeros for the hundredths place, because with the algorithm, I mark off every 2 places, bring up the decimal. What number squared is closest to 34 without going over? That would be 5. 5 squared is 25. Subtract and get a remainder of 9. Again, you should know your algorithm by now. That's why I gave you all those problems to practice it. Drop your next mark off. Double 5, which is 10. 1 goes into 9 exactly 9 times, so I would try 8. 8 here and here. 8 times 8 is 64, carry your 6. 8 times 1 is 0 and 6 is 6. 8 times 1 is 8. I didn't guess too big. I can subtract if I borrow and borrow again. 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 6 is 3. Drop the next mark off, the 2 zeros. Double 5, 8, 58, and that would give you 116. And again, the easy way to do that is just add 8 to 108 is 116. Again, 1 goes into 3 exactly 3 times. You could use the 3 or the 2, okay, because it doesn't matter. You just need to know if this is 5 or above or 4 below. And it's obviously going to be below, okay, whoops, it's going to be below 5. So since, by the way, when you subtract here, you would find out, excuse me, that 2 is too small, so I guess I should have used 3. But again, the one thing that's obvious is it's not going to be more than 5. But I suppose we better make sure. 18 carry your 1, 4, 3. Again, you can see 3 is going to work. But again, as long as this number is less than 5, this stays the same, and your answer is 5 8/10. By the way, a little side note, when I gave you that skills test where you had to round to the nearest tenth or to the nearest hundredth, a lot of you got problems wrong because you stopped at the tenths or stopped at the hundredths and you didn't round to it. So remember, if you're rounding to the tenth, you go to the hundredths. But if the problem doesn't state which one it wants you to do, you have the choice that you want. So again, the key thing here is draw a picture. If you draw the picture, you'll find the right triangle. If you find the right triangle, you can determine whether you're looking for the hypotenuse or the leg. If you know whether you're looking for the hypotenuse or leg, you can choose the right formula, plug the numbers in, and work it out. And again, if it goes even, that's great. If it doesn't, if the problem says to the nearest tenth, round to the tenth. If the problem says write in the simplest radical form, write in the simplest radical form. And if the problem doesn't say anything, then it's up to you, whatever you want. Good luck.